classmates, good day. The topic that we are going to report today is about discovering the 1987 Constitution of the Philippines. Our report highlights the creation of the Philippine Constitution. So what we'll discuss in our report is about the Philippine Constitution and its underlying history, such that we'll talk about the complete chronology of how our Constitution is made. We will also talk about the definition, its scope, background, and origin. So with that said, let's proceed to the gist of our report. Constitution. The Constitution is defined as a set of fundamental principles or established precedents according to which a state or other organization is governed. This is the combination of distinct entities into one group, with the same principles and ideals, in which such principles define the nature and extent of government. The Constitution of the Philippines, the supreme law of the Republic of the Philippines, has been in effect since 1987. There were only three other constitutions that effectively governed the country: the 1935 Commonwealth Constitution, the 1973 Constitution, and the Freedom Constitution. However, there were earlier constitutions attempted by Filipinos in the struggle to break free from the colonial yoke. With that, let us proceed to the chronology of the Philippine Constitution.
1897 Constitution of Biak-Labato. The Constitution of Biak-Labato was the provisionary constitution of the Philippine Republic during the Philippine Revolution and was promulgated by the Philippine Revolutionary Government on November 1, 1897. This constitution, borrowed from Cuba, was written by Isabelo Artacho and Felix Ferrer in Spanish, and later on translated in Tagalog. Supreme Council, vested with the power of the Republic, headed by the President and the four department secretaries: the Interior, Foreign Affairs, Treasury, and War. The supreme government of the Republic shall be vested in a Supreme Council, composed of President, a Vice President, and four secretaries for the conduct of the foreign relations, of war, of the interior, and of the treasury. Consejo Supremo de Gracia y Justicia, Supreme Council of Grace and Justice, given the authority to make decisions and affirm or disapprove the sentences rendered by other courts and to dictate rule for the administration of justice. Example: the Supreme Council of Grace and Justice, to be established by the Supreme Council of Government, shall have authority to make decisions and affirm or disapprove the sentences rendered by other courts and to dictate rules for the administration of justice. Asamblea de Representantes, Assembly of Representatives, to be convened after the revolution to create a new constitution and to elect a new council of government and representatives of the people. On September 15, 1898, the Revolutionary Congress was convened in Malolos, Bulacan, thus with drafting the Constitution for the Philippines, symbol of the Biak-Labato Constitution. The separation of the Philippines from the Spanish monarchy and their formation into an independent state with its own government called the Philippine Republic has been the end sought by the revolution in the existing war, begun on the 24th of August 1886 and therefore in its name and by the power delegated by the Filipino power, interpreting faithfully their desires and ambitions with the representative of the revolution in a meeting at Biak-Labato, November 1, 1887, unanimously adopted the following articles for the Constitution of the state. The Constitution of Biak-Labato was never fully implemented since across the Pact of Biak-Labato was signed between the Spanish and the Philippine Revolutionary Army.
Hi Hi everyone, my name is Lovely Sevilla and today we will talk about the Malolos Constitution. So first, after signing the truce, the Filipino revolutionary leaders accepted a payment from Spain and went to exile in Hong Kong. Upon the defeat of the Spanish to the Americans in the Battle of Manila Bay on May 1, 1898, the United States Navy transported Aguinaldo back to the Philippines, and the newly reformed Philippine Revolutionary Forces reverted to the control of Aguinaldo, and the Philippine Declaration of Independence Day was issued on June 12, 1898, and together with the several decrees that formed the first Philippines Republic. Now the Malolos Congress was elected, which selected a commission to draw up a draft constitution on September 17, 1898, which was composed of wealthy and educated men. The document they came up with is approved by the Congress on November 29, 1898, and proclaimed by Aguinaldo on January 21, 1899. And it was titled The Political Constitution of 1899, and it was written in Spanish. Now the Constitution has 39 articles, which is divided into 14 articles of transitory provisions and a final additional article. And the document was patterned after the Spanish Constitution of 1812 with influences from Belgium, Mexico, Brazil, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Guatemala, and the French Constitution of 1793. And according to Felipe Calderon, the main author of the Constitution, namely the Cartilla and the Sangguniang Hukuman, the Charter of Laws and Morals of the Katipunan, written by Emilio Jacinto in 1896. The Biak na Bato Constitution of 1897, that is a plan by Isabelo Cartaco, Mabinis Constitutional Program of the Philippine Republic of 1898, and the Provisional Constitution of Mariano Ponce in 1898, that is followed the Spanish constitutions, and the autonomy projects of Paterno in 1898.
Now this is the preamble of the Political Constitution of 1899. We, the representatives of the Filipino people, lawfully convened in order to establish justice, provide for common defense, promote the general welfare, and ensure the benefits of liberty, imploring the aid of sovereign legislator of the universe for the attainment of these ends, have voted, decreed, and sanctioned the following political constitution.
The 27 Articles of Title IV detail the natural rights and popular sovereignty of Filipinos, the enumeration of which does not imply the prohibition of the other rights not expressly stated. Title III, Article 5 also declares the state recognizes the freedom and equality of all beliefs, as well as the separation of church and state. These are direct reactions to features of the Spanish government in the Philippines, where friars were dominant agents of the state. The form of government according to Title II, Article 4 is to be popular, representative, alternative, and responsible, and shall exercise the three distinct powers, which are legislative, executive, and judicial. The legislative power was vested in unicameral body called the Assembly of Representatives, which members are elected for terms of 4 years. Some powers not legislative in nature were also given to the body, such as the right of impeaching the President, cabinet members, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and the Solicitor General. And then, the executive power was vested in the President and elected by a Constituent Assembly of the Assembly of Representatives and Special Representative. The President will serve a term of 4 years with re-election. There was no Vice President, and in case of vacancy, a President was to be elected by a Constituent Assembly.
And lastly, judicial powers were given to the Supreme Court and other lower courts to be created by law. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court was to be elected by the legislature with the concurrence of the President and his cabinet.
And in 1899, the Malolos Constitution was never forced due to the ongoing war. The Philippines was effectively a territory of the United States upon signing to the Treaty of Paris between Spain and United States, transferring sovereignty in the Philippines on December 10, 1898.
1935, the Commonwealth Constitution. The Commonwealth era is a 10-year transitional period in Philippine history from 1935 to 1945 in preparation for independence from the United States as provided for under the Philippine Independence Act, or more popularly known as the Tidings-McDuffie Law. The Commonwealth era was interrupted when the Japanese occupied the Philippines in January 2, 1942. The Commonwealth government led by Manuel L. Quezon and Sergio S. Osmeña went into exile in the U.S. Quezon died of tuberculosis while in exile and Osmeña took over as president. At the same time, the Japanese forces installed a puppet government in Manila, headed by Jose P. Laurel as president. This government is known as the Second Philippine Republic. On October 20, 1944, the Allied forces led by General Douglas MacArthur landed on the island of Leyte to liberate the Philippines from the Japanese. Japan formally surrendered in September 2, 1945. There are two acts of the United States Congress were passed that may be considered to have qualities of constitutionality. The first act is the Organic Act of 1902. First organic law for the Philippine Islands that provided for the creation of a popularly elected Philippine Assembly. The act specified that legislative power would be vested in a bicameral legislature composed of the Philippine Commission, the Upper House, and the Philippine Assembly as the lowest house. Other act is the Philippine Autonomy Act of 1916, commonly referred to as Jones Law, modified the structure of the Philippine government through the removal of the Philippine Commission, replacing it with a Senate that served as the upper house and its members elected by the Filipino voters. The first truly elected national legislature. Preamble of the 1935 Commonwealth. The Filipino people imploring the aid of divine providence in order to establish a government that shall embody their ideals, conserve and develop the patrimony of the nation, promote the general welfare and secure themselves and their posterity and blessings of the independence under a regime of justice, liberty, and democracy, do ordain and promulgate this Constitution.
In 1965, Ferdinand E. Marcos was elected president, and in 1967, Philippine Congress passed a resolution calling for a constitutional convention to change the 1935 Constitution, which is the Commonwealth Constitution. Marcos won the re-election in 1969 in a bid boosted by campaign overspending and use of government funds. Election of the delegates to the Constitutional Convention were held on the 20th of November 1970, and the convention began formally on the 1st of June 1971, with former President Carlos P. Garcia being elected as convention president. Before the convention finished its work on the 23rd of September 1972, the late Ferdinand Marcos went on television to announce Proclamation Number 1081, establishing a state of martial law in the Philippines. Constitutional authoritarianism, or the use of constitutional law to justify authoritarian governance, was imposed on the entire country to build a new society. In simpler words, constitutional authoritarianism basically highlights or talks about the supremacy of the Constitution in such a way that they mandate and set the do's and don'ts of the constituents of a specific state or nation. In addition, it also focuses on the provision of so much authority to those in power, and very less to those who are mere citizens. The case of constitutional authoritarianism is that it favors the concentration of too much power in a leader not constitutionally accountable to the people. So with that in mind, we can picture out that an example of constitutional authoritarianism is the martial law. So the question here is, what triggered Ferdinand Marcos to declare and implement the martial law? The government's official rationale for the order was to protect the authority of the republic and guarantee security of its citizens against lawless elements, particularly communist insurgency and other rebellious tendency. So Marcos cited a growing communist insurgency as the reason for the martial law, which was provided for in the 1935 Constitution. President Marcos imposed martial law on the nation from 1972 to 1981 to suppress increasing civil strife and the threat of a communist takeover, following a series of bombings in Manila. When Marcos declared the martial law, he claimed that the implementation was done to respond to the communist threat posed by the newly founded Communist Party of the Philippines, or the CPP, and the sectarian rebellion of the Mindanao Independence Movement, or the MIM. Some delegates of the ongoing Constitutional Convention were placed behind bars, and others went into hiding or were voluntarily exiled. While ascertaining the real intention for Marcos for imposing military rule is a subject of endless debate between opposing views, the result is obvious. The martial law regime prolonged and centralized the far-reaching presidential powers and privileges of Marcos for a total of 21 years. Under conditions of martial law, Marcos had the monopoly to make decisions on government operations because there were hardly any democratic limits to his prerogatives. State power and resources were concentrated on Marcos as the de facto chief executive, chief legislator, chief justice, and chief commander of the armed forces all at the same time. The cost of Marcos' dictatorship come not only from the people but also to the country. Specifically, the data taken from the World Bank and Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development shows that there is a lack or negative progress regarding the GDP or the gross domestic product of the country, as the debts incurred during the time of Marcos skyrocketed. Aside from that, the media and other signs of democracy were shut down by the dictatorship, silencing public criticism and controlled the information accessible by the people. Lastly, there were violations towards the human rights, such that many were electrocuted, strangled, raped, and that about 70,000 people were imprisoned, 34,000 were tortured, and 3,240 were killed. After all the amendments introduced, the 1973 Constitution was merely a way for the President to keep executive powers, abolish the Senate, and by any means never acted as parliamentary system. Instead, functioned as an authoritarian presidential system with all the real power concentrated in the hands of the President, with the backing of the Constitution. So aside from the cons, let us also talk about those that were considered good and positive by many during the Marcos regime. So specifically, under the Marcos Constitution, several establishments and infrastructures were made that are still accessible by the Filipinos in the present. These include pioneering hospitals, such as the Philippine Heart Center, Lung Center of the Philippines, and the National Kidney and Transplant Institute. In addition, cultural tourism and heritage sites such as the Cultural Center of the Philippines, Folk Arts Theater, and the Philippine Convention Center, among others, were also constructed. These so-called achievements accrued that some Filipinos classify the Marcos reign as the golden age of the Philippines. Despite all of that, such accomplishments can never compensate the abuses, mistreatment, and innocent life taken during his regime. Marcos was forced to hold snap election a year early, and said elections were marked by widespread fraud. Marcos declared himself winner despite international condemnation and nationwide protest. A small group of military rebels attempted to stage a coup, but failed. However, this triggered what came to be known as the EDSA People Power Revolution of 1986, as people from all walks of life spilled into the streets. Under pressure from the United States of America, who used to support Marcos and his martial law, the Marcos family fled into exile. His opponent in the snap elections, Benigno Aquino Jr.'s widow, Corazon Aquino, was installed as president in February 25, 1986, that led to the creation of another constitution.
The last topic of our podcast is about 1987 Constitution after martial law. The 1987 Constitution currently protects our institution from a repetition of the martial law government under Marcos. The Supreme Court has the authority to examine every official action to decide whether a serious abuse of discretion has occurred. Padlock Congress. In March 1986, President Aquino proclaimed a transitional constitution to last for a year while the Constitutional Commission drafted a permanent constitution. This transitional constitution, called the Freedom Constitution, maintained many provisions of the old one, including in rewritten form the presidential right to rule by decree. In 1986, a constitutional convention was created, composed of 48 members appointed by President Aquino from varied backgrounds and representation. The new constitution was officially adopted on February 2, 1987. The constitution begins with a preamble and 18 self-contained articles. It established the Philippines as a democratic republican state where sovereignty resides in the people and all government authority emanates from them. It allocates governmental powers among the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the government. So, the government has three branches. So, the three branches of the government are executive, legislative, and judicial. And there are definitions in these individuals. So, the first branch of government is the executive. The executive is a branch composed of the president and the vice president who are elected by direct popular vote and serve a term of 6 years. The Constitution grants the president authority to appoint his cabinet. These departments form a large portion of the country's bureaucracy. The president is the head of the state and chief executive. His power is limited by significant checks from two other co-equal branches of the government, especially during times of emergency. So the executive branch of a government is in charge of maintaining order and managing the affairs of a state. So the second branch of the government is the legislative. Legislative branch is authorized to make laws, alter, and repeal them through the power vested in the Philippine province. This institution is divided into Senate and the House of Representatives. The 24 senators are elected by popular vote and can serve no more than 2 consecutive 6-year terms. The House is composed of district representatives representing a particular geographic area and makes up around 80% of the total number of representatives. There are 234 legislative districts in the Philippines that elect their representatives to serve 3-year terms. So the Constitution itself may sometimes be changed or changed by the Congress in order to ensure that the nation abides by its system. So the last branch of the government is the judicial. So the judicial branch holds the power to settle controversies involving rights,
that are legally demandable and enforceable. This branch determines whether or not there has been grave abuse of discretion amounting to lack of excess of jurisdiction on the part and instrumentality of the government. The Philippine court system is vested with the power of the judiciary and is composed of Supreme Court and lower courts as created by law. So the judiciary is the system of courts that resolves legal conflicts and disputes as well as interprets, defends, and implement the law in court proceedings. The Constitution also established three independent constitutional commissions, namely, first is the Civil Service Commission, the central agency in charge of government personnel. Second is Commission on Elections, mandated to enforce and administer all election laws and regulations. The last and the third is Commission on Audit, which examines all funds, transactions, and property accounts of the government and its agencies.